Okay, welcome back, guys. This is Professor Lai, and this video is meant for Chapter 4, Capacity Planning. So you guys may still remember, at the beginning of this course, I mentioned that our course material will mainly separate into three parts. The first part is mainly talking about the internal operational process. All right. The second part is mainly dealing with the customer need, customer satisfaction. All right. The third part is trying to kind of connect between the internal operational process and the external customer side, which is mainly dealing with the supply chain. All right. Currently, we're still in the first part, which is more dealing with the internal operational process for firm itself. All right. And capacity planning definitely will be very important aspect related to internal operational process. Now, let's continue. So, first of all, let's look at learning goals. All right. So, of course, we need to understand basically what is the capacity management, capacity planning. Okay. And if we expand our capacity, what is the corresponding advantage? What is the corresponding disadvantage? Okay. So we call it economies and diseconomies of scale. Okay. What are the relationship between these two? Okay. That's the first thing we want to clarify within this specific chapter. All right. And then if we move to the implementations, perspective, there are many different strategies when you try to implement your capacity management. Okay. For example, here, as I show here, all right, we can have expansionist strategy. We can have wait and see capacity, type of the strategy. All right. What are the key differences between all these different type of strategies? What are the common point, okay, between these different capacity planning strategies? Okay, so those are also quite important to give us a better view about what is the capacity management. And of course, after we are very clear about those conceptual foundation about the capacity planning, then we'll start to introduce a very important, also very simple capacity planning methods, the quantitative methods. All right, now let's start to talk about the capacity definition. Okay, first. So what is the capacity? All right. The definition of capacity is quite straightforward. As you can see here, okay, basically the capacity of operational process within the firm is basically represented by the maximum rate of output of a process or a system. You may still remember, all right, when we talk about operational process, all right, we're saying that there are two very important key elements within this whole process. What are those key elements? You may still remember that, right? One thing is input, one thing is output, right? Still the same thing, essentially still the same thing, all right? When we try to express the idea of capacity, okay, we're still trying to basically improve the efficiency of the transformation from the input to the output. We all know that we don't actually have unlimited input, no matter you're producing products or you are providing services, right? So your input is limited, okay? Then given the limited input, how can we efficiently, maximize the output amount, all right? That's a very important question that we need to basically clarify, all right? Now, before we even jump into the specific details related to capacity planning. Okay, here you can clearly see this plot, all right? And here we have both capacity planning and constraint management, all right? Actually, the constraint management basically is the main topic that we will cover in chapter 5, all right? But people may naturally have the question, what is the key difference between capacity planning and constraint management, okay? Let me help you to illustrate it. Actually, the key difference here is very straightforward. All right. In short, capacity planning is more focusing on the big picture perspective. Okay. Basically, we're trying to make the capacity planning as efficient as possible to be consistent with the corporate strategy. All right. However, the constraint management is more from the implementation perspective. Okay. So let me give you a very quick example. For instance, we already have the corporate strategy, no matter you are a company who is producing a product or providing services, okay? We already have the corporate strategy. Now, as an employee within the operations management department, now you're trying to planning for your capacity. For example, you are trying to decide whether you would like to basically improve the capacity by buying new equipment, all right? Now, before you make this decision, okay, related to capacity planning, okay, you have to basically talk with your colleagues in other departments, right? For example, you have to talk some other employee within accounting department and to make sure that if you buy this new equipment, will it cost too much, money for the whole company? All right. You may not. You may need to talk to the finance colleague and ask them, okay, if we do not actually have enough cash flow currently, okay, how much money we need to borrow? Can we borrow this amount of money in order to introduce this new equipment? All right. You may need to also talk about the marketing, department. For example, if we try to buy this equipment to produce a new production line, all right, and what would be the forecast of the customer needs about this new product? Okay, so these are all very key questions that you need to collaborate and also coordinate with some colleagues in other departments. All right, but our final goal is still the same. We're trying to basically meet our corporate strategy. But efficient capacity planning can help you, reach your final target of your corporate more, smoothly and more faster. All right. So this is related to the capacity plan. Now let's move to the constraint management. Let me give you a quick example to illustrate. All right. Suppose now you already decide to expand your capacity. Okay. Given that situation, you still need to implement well. All right. For example, right now you plan to produce a product for a certain amount. All right. But you know that in your warehouse, you only have, this small amount of the raw material. Basically it means that you still need to buy some more raw material from your supplier. All right. So in that case, you have to negotiate with your supplier and see whether they actually can provide this amount of the raw material. Even if they have enough, raw material, they will still spend some time before they can actually ship their raw material from their factory back to your factory. All right. So all the things you have to make it as smooth as possible, such that it will not affect the production process. Okay. So constraint management is more focusing on the implementation perspective, exactly as I just mentioned by using this example. All right. Now let's continue. So now let's continue to talk about capacity. All right. So each time when we try to measure capacity, all right, definitely we will incorporate two aspects, output and input, since actually capacity itself is basically related to how to improve the operational process, which actually transforming the input to output, right? But sometimes when we measure the capacity, we're more focusing on the output, and sometimes we're more focusing on the input. It definitely actually depends on the type of industry and also the company characteristics, basically the product characteristics or service characteristics. Okay, so then people may generally have the question, okay, what type of industry, what type of product actually are more frequently used in output capacity measures, and in what type of the companies or products actually they're more focusing using the input measure of capacity. Okay, actually the key difference here is very straightforward. As long as your production process or service process is standardized enough, okay, basically as long as we can easily compare the outputs, okay, for example, from this year to the next year, or from this company to another company, okay, no matter horizontally or vertically, as long as we can compare the products, the outputs easily, we will more focus on the output measure of capacity. Okay, so the key characteristic of using output measure of capacity, okay, is that basically if your industry or if your company has the very standardized production process, and also if the volume is relatively high, then we are more focusing on output measure of capacity. So on the other side, all right, if within a certain type of industry or for a certain type of the product, all right, if the output itself is hard to compare with each other, okay, for example, for a certain type of product, they are highly customized. All right, so it's hard to compare outputs with outputs. So in those type of the situations, we are more focusing on, measuring the inputs. All right, so ensures basically for the industry who actually has, or more customized the process, and also who has a relatively lower volume. Okay, for this type of industry, we are more favoring of using input measure of capacity. Okay, that's the key difference here. Just keep in mind. Now, here, we introduce a very important measurement related to capacity, which is called utilization. And as you clearly see here, the equation for utilization is very straightforward. all right? It equals to average output rate divided by maximum capacity. Of course, times 100% since this is a ratio number, okay? So how to interpret it fundamentally? Let me help you to illustrate, okay? I can give you guys a very easy way to understand the essence of this specific equation, okay? So of course, the numerator is represented by the average output rate, okay? This is basically representing how much I have currently, okay? How much I have. How about the denominator, the maximum capacity? This is actually representing what? This is representing how much I can achieve at most. Okay, so basically this specific equation is expressing what? Is expressing how much I have over how much I can reach at most. Okay, give you a very quick example. For instance, suppose, okay, you can work, for example, 10 hours at most in each day. Okay, and today you work for 5 hours. Okay, then how much hours you work? 5 hours today, right? How much you can work at most in every day? 10 hours. So what is your utilization rate? Very simple, right? You just use 5/10 and then times 100%. Then your utilization rate today would be 50%. Okay, this would be just a very simple, very straightforward example to illustrate utilization, okay? So the utilization rate, in short, basically is representing how much I have currently over how much I can reach at most, okay? So let's continue. Now, let's just use a little bit more complicated example to illustrate the essence of utilization, all right? So let's look at the context first, all right? So basically this process currently servicing an average of 45 customers per day, all right? And basically, observations recently showed that the utilization itself is about 90%, okay? And allowing for just a 10% capacity cushion, okay? So basically here, the definition of capacity cushion is very simple, right? The maximum capacity rate always should be 100%, right? But since you utilize 90% of it, then the percentage that you do not utilize would be represented by capacity cushion. So that's why here, utilization rate and the capacity cushion, if you sum it up, it should always equal to 100%, okay? So if demand is expected to be 80% of the current level in 5 years, and the management wants to have a capacity cushion of just 7%, what the capacity requirement should be planned, and what is the percentage change of capacity requirements, okay? Now, also here, I also mentioned the updated capacity cushion, okay, which is just 7%. It also automatically tells you what is the updated utilization rate. Since utilization rate plus capacity cushion should always equal to 100%, then it actually indicates that the updated utilization rate in the next 5 years should be 93%, okay, 93%. Now, let's look at the question. So first of all, we're asking what the capacity requirement should be planned, okay? What should be the updated capacity requirement, okay? How to calculate this? Remember, utilization always equals to your output, right? Divided by your capacity, okay? Now, we know that basically the future utilization, as I show here, okay? The future utilization basically is what? Is 93%, right? Because the maximum capacity rate should be 100%. And since the capacity cushion is 7%, then 100% minus 7%, you should get 93% for the future utilization rate, okay? So in this specific context, we already know the future utilization, okay? Can we get some, information related to the future output level? Yes. The reason is that, first of all, we know the output amount is 45 customers per day, as you can see show here, okay? And we also know that actually, after the update, right, the demand will be only 80% of the current level, which is shown here, okay? It actually tells you that, since the current level is 45, all right, after update, it will become only 80% of the current level, means that after update, all right, the updated output level should be 45 times 0.8, okay, which is actually 36. If you calculate the numerator here, it should be 36. Now, still based on the utilization rate for the future route, all right, you know the utilization rate is 93%. You know that for the numerator, the updated output rate, output level should be 36, okay? Can we calculate the future maximum capacity amount? Yes, of course you can, right? Basically, you use 36 divided by 93%, you will get the denominator value showing here. Okay, so here I would like to emphasize that although the equation is like utilization equals, the output rate over output over the maximum capacity, okay, but definitely within the specific equation, okay, as long as you know any two of these three elements, you can easily calculate the remaining element within the specific equation. Here, as you can clearly see here, once we know utilization and also the output level, right, we can easily calculate the capacity. So that's why here I didn't directly list the number. You can easily calculate by using the calculator. Okay, so there we already get the result for the first question, Alex. Now, the second question is just basically one step further. Okay, what is the percentage change of capacity requirement? Since we're talking about the percentage change of capacity requirement, okay, what we need to know. Currently, we already know the future capacity requirement, right? And in order to get some idea about the change of capacity requirement, we also first need to calculate, all right, what is the current capacity? How to calculate the current capacity level? Very easy, right? Basically, you're still using the same structure, using the same equation, but this is actually corresponding to the current period, Now, in current period, what is the current utilization? Very simple. Actually, the context already directly tells you, which is 90%. So that's why here, you see, this is 90%, corresponding to the current utilization rate. That's the first thing. Secondly, all right, related to the numerator, it's actually representing the current output level. Do you know the current output level? Yes, of course. The first sentence already tells us this should be corresponding to 45 customers. So still based on the same equation showing here, can you calculate the current capacity level? Yes, you can. Basically, you still use 45 over 90% to get the current capacity. So keep in mind, currently, all right, by using the same structure of equation for both the current period and also the future period, you can already get the corresponding current capacity and the future capacity. But in order to calculate the percentage change of capacity requirement, what you need to do? You always use what? You use future capacity minus the current capacity. Is that the end of the whole calculation? No, that's actually representing numerator because we are talking about the percentage change. Okay, since we are talking about the percentage change, the numerator should be future capacity minus the current capacity. Okay, and then you need to divide it by one thing. What is the reference point? The basement should be current maximum capacity. Okay, so basically, in order to get the percent change of the capacity requirement, you further use future capacity minus current capacity. Okay, and that difference, you need to use that to divide it by the current maximum capacity in order to get the results. Okay, I didn't actually explicitly list the results. Try your best to calculate the result. And if you're not sure about the results, just let me know. Okay, I can tell you whether your whole process is correct or not. But the key sense is exactly what I just mentioned. Okay, you see that actually we basically flexibly using this equation. Okay, as I said, as long as you know two out of the three elements, you can calculate the remaining elements within this equation. Okay, now let's continue. So here we come to the economies and the diseconomies of scale. Okay, actually, in simple way of explaining this, basically the economics and diseconomies of scale is basically represented the advantage and also the disadvantage. Okay, of expanding your capacity. Okay, so which indicates that it's not always the case that in expanding your capacity is better for the company. Okay, it's actually very logical, right? Otherwise, every company is trying their best to to expand the capacity all the time. Now, what can be the advantage of improving your capacity? Okay, Correspondingly, you can see these are some potential, the advantages of improving your capacity. Okay, for instance, the first one. Okay, basically here, okay, it may actually spread the fixed cost. Okay, for instance, all right, we all know that if we buy equipment, starting from the day that you buy this new equipment, no matter you use it or not use, you always will depreciate. Okay, and if we use it more efficiently, okay, by producing more amount, actually this type of depreciation cost can be spread into more volumes of product. So that's why we say that, okay, if you produce more, it can spread the fixed cost. Okay, that's the first dimension. The second dimension, it may also reduce the construction cost. For example, right now you already build one warehouse, all right, for this whole production process. Okay, currently you have one production line, all right, and if you try to improve your capacity, okay, if you want to introduce a new production line, okay, and if this warehouse is big enough to contain this new production line, okay, then basically your construction cost for building up this new warehouse can be actually assigned into two production lines instead of one production line. Okay, that's how we basically using the capacity improvement to reduce the construction cost. Okay, that's a second potential advantage. Okay, the third potential advantage would be corresponding to the cutting cost of purchased materials. It's actually very straightforward, right? If you try to improve your capacity, definitely you probably will need to produce more products, and you probably will need more raw material. Okay, so each time when you try to basically negotiate with your supplier, right? We all know that in most cases, when you try to negotiate with your supplier, if you want a higher volume of your raw material, you probably will get a better deal. Okay, that's how we basically will cut the cost of purchased materials if the volume itself is larger. Okay, that's the third aspect. And also here, of course, if you can handle a more complex situation, okay, during the the capacity improvement process, okay, if you can handle two production lines instead of one production line simultaneously, if you can basically deal with different experts within the different production line, okay, they will actually give you more competitive advantage, okay, during this whole process. Okay, these are all different potential economies of scale, okay, that you can imagine within the capacity improvement process. Okay, and of course, on the other side, definitely you will have some diseconomies of scale. Okay, definitely you will have some disadvantage when you try to improve the capacity. First of all, it will cause some complexity. Definitely, all right, because you need to handle, let's say, two production lines instead of one. Okay, how to coordinate different equipments, how to coordinate different experts. Okay, these are all very important things that you need to face during this whole process. Okay, and since you are dealing with, for example, steel, if you're dealing with two production line, okay, instead of one, okay, you are not quite sure which one should be getting the first priority. All right, before the demand is realized, right? So sometimes you may actually lose your focus during this whole process, and it also would lead to different type of efficiencies. I will not actually spend too much time to talk about it. Okay, it's actually very natural. Now, here actually I just provide a very quick example about economies and these economies of scale, but by using a very standard example related to the healthcare management. Okay, so here you can clearly see that when this hospital can provide 250 bed, okay, the average unit of cost is actually at this specific level. Okay, and then if we try to basically expand our capacity, all right, you can clearly see that once this capacity level increases from 250 bed to 500 beds, okay, then you see the average unit cost actually can reduce. Okay, this is actually corresponding to economies of scale, right? For example, at the beginning, all right, for within the same building, you only provide 250 bed, all right. However, later on you add another 250 bed into the same building, okay, in order to offer service to more patients, all right, and then definitely the average unit of cost will kind of decrease. Okay, but let's say if you try to expand your capacity from 500 bed to 750 bed, why the average unit cost actually start to increase? Okay, very simple. For example, the maximum amount for this specific building, okay, that you can offer to the patient would be, for example, 550. Okay, and then if you try to provide service to 750 beds, then what you need to do? Probably you have to build another building in order to offer more services to patients. Okay, and that's why in those circumstances, okay, the average unit cost will start to increase. Okay, so that's why here you can clearly see that it's not always the case that the capacity, the higher, the better. No, that's not always the case. It depends on the corresponding revenue and also the cost. Okay, it should be very clear here. Now, let's continue. All right, so yeah, there are still a few very important terms related to capacity management. Okay, actually, let's start from the capacity cushions. I already used a quick example, the classic example to illustrate what is the capacity cushions. Okay, keep in mind that basically the utilization rate plus capacity cushion should always equals to 100%. Basically, utilization rate is a percentage that you actually use within your maximum capacity amount. Okay, and the capacity cushion basically is the percentage that you do not use, within the whole capacity management process. Okay, which should be very straightforward. And that's why you see that basically capacity cushion basically just equals to 100% minus the utilization rate. Okay, so in the problem, okay, if I tell you capacity cushion, you automatically know what is the corresponding utilization rate. Or on the other hand, if I tell you the utilization rate, you automatically should know what is the capacity cushion correspondingly. Okay, now we may ask, what can be viewed as an appropriate capacity cushion level? It really depends on the industry type and also the product characteristic. But in general, in more capital intensive industry, we prefer lower level of cushions, okay, which is normally under 10%. While in those less capital intensive industry, for example, hotel management, show here, okay, you may actually provide a little bit higher cushion, okay? It can be around 30 to 40%. But still, it depends on the industry type, okay? Now, let's move on. So here, even if we already decide to basically improve our capacity, okay, there are still many different type of strategies that we can implement, okay? Here, I basically provide two extreme strategies, okay, on the, two different sides, okay? One is called expansionist strategy, another one is called wait and see strategy. Okay, now actually the key difference here is very straightforward, very simple. Okay, expansionist strategy can be viewed as the most aggressive strategy to improve your capacity. Okay, normally if you implement this strategy, you will invest a lot before the market demand realize. Okay, which indicates that actually you are very confident about basically the market demand of this specific product or service. Okay, that's why you basically invest for example, you build up the equipment, you basically recruit some new employee, okay, and start to do the whole production line before actually the market demand is realized. Okay, you may actually you believe that the market demand for this specific product, for instance, right, is pretty good. All right, so that's why here you by using expansionist strategy, you actually do have some advantage, but also have some disadvantage. Let's first talk about the advantage part. So the advantage of using expansionist strategy is that basically, if the real situation is following your forecast, okay, if this ideal situation happens, then basically you will not lose any profit opportunity, okay? And you will probably get a better market share within the whole market related to this specific product, since you are the leader within this specific market, okay? And you can even imagine what is the disadvantage. If basically the real situation, if the market demand realization finally is not reaching your forecast, then what will happen? Since you already incur a lot of cost at the beginning, right? You may even lose money since maybe the revenue that you finally get is actually lower than the cost if that happens, right? So expansionist strategy provides some advantage, but also provides some disadvantage. We normally view it as the most aggressive type of strategy when you try to improve your capacity, all right? Now, what is the other side? We call it wait and see strategy, okay? This strategy is much more conservative. It's much more conservative, all right? You will not improve your capacity, okay, until you figure out that if you do not, increase your capacity, you definitely will lose some profit in opportunity because your current capacity cannot fit for the current, at least for the near future customer demand. Okay, so at this moment, you have to basically improve the capacity, all right, such that you will not lose profit in opportunity in the near future. Okay, so with the wait and see strategy, clearly you will bear a relatively lower risk, especially when the market demand is not that good. All right. But what is the corresponding disadvantage if you use wait and see strategy? First of all, since the improvement of capacity needs some time, right? You probably will lose some profit in opportunity. That's the first disadvantage because you have some layback during this whole process. Okay. The secondly, since you only improve your capacity when it reaches a limit, okay? You probably will become the follower within the whole market. So as a follower, your market share for this specific product, especially for those new products, normally will be a little bit lower compared to the leader within this whole specific market, okay? So that can be viewed as the main disadvantages of using wait and see strategy, okay? So this would be the part 1 of chapter 4.